Adi and I are back. We are back after a hiatus to talk about ways to be more productive, how to live a happier life, how to prevent burnout, and how to stay sane in this crazy work environment that we live in. We're going under a new name. We're now known as the Team Connection. You can check us out online at www.theteamconnection.com. And in the next couple weeks, we're going to share with you how to focus, which is something that we hear a lot from our clients is, how do I just pay attention, right? How do I not procrastinate? How do I not get distracted? How do I, know what I'm doing and stick with it? I think it's a really common thing. And it's something that we're going to go in the next couple of months or so, really dive deep into it. And the reason we want to talk about this is that it's going to help you, one, just conserve mental energy, right? Two, it's going to help you work less overall, but work more effectively. And three, if you want to advance in your career or advance in your life, this skill is very transferable. So no matter what industry you're in, being able to focus is going to benefit you both as a worker, as a lover, as a parent, as a hobbyist, whatever you want to do. This is a universally transferable skill. It's going to really help you out. So Adi, you want to tell us a little bit about task switching and about focus? What is it that we're talking about here?
So when we talk about task switching, what is also commonly known as kind of multitasking, what we're talking about is either intentionally or unintentionally moving from engaging with one thing and focusing our attention on one thing to something else. And the way our attention works is we have different aspects and types of attention. We can have focused attention, kind of like I am reading a book, or I am standing at a bus stop waiting for my bus and I'm looking for buses. We're focused on something. We can also have kind of like an open attention. What is coming at me? What's grabbing me? And these different kind of attentions have kind of a competing nature. So if we think of our brains as kind of a metabolic thing that consumes energy in order to get to a point, we are at any point where we make a choice, we are exerting energy in order to engage and re-engage in certain things. So one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later is how mindfulness can help us kind of just get to know how our attention works. How do we invite attention to go back to whatever it is that we decided needs to be the focus of what we're doing? And I don't know about other people. I know very few people who are having an easy time focusing at this day and age. I know that for me, my phone is always here. There are other competing websites. There are all these things, and they are alerting us and pulling our attention from what it is that we intended to do. So say if I'm reading an article because I'm giving a talk later, and suddenly my phone either beeps or just flashes a light, I'm no longer attending to my article. I'm now attending to the phone. And that situation costs me. And I think this is what we want to focus on today. Being aware that we are actually wasting energy and taking away from our productivity is important. Because studies have shown that even people who are really good at multitasking are way, way better at single tasking. Way better. So there's numerous studies throughout the years, and the outcome, they call it different names. The point is there is consistently in the research that shows that even people who are extremely efficient, if you give them two tasks, for example, to move from one mathematic problem to another. There was an interesting study where people they were asked to say out loud the name of a digit in their first language and their second language. So naturally, the first language was faster, of course. But when they had to switch from first language to second language, then the first language was slower. Even though some people, like there are variations, of course, some people were pretty fast in that as well, and slower than just naming the first language digits. So what we're seeing is a cost in time. There's also a cost in energy. And I read this interesting little nugget by Mayers, Evans, and Robinson, who talk about what happens to us. What is it that happens to us when we are switching from one task to another? When, say, I'm reading my article and I'm looking at my phone, I'm reading my article, looking at my phone. The first thing that happens is that my executive skills, they need to do two things that cost me. The first thing is called goal switching. I have one goal when I'm reading an article and a completely different goal when I'm looking at my phone. My goal in reading the article is to get information and digest it, maybe summarize it, find out the place that it fits in my research or my study or my presentation, whatever it is. My goal when I look at my phone is to talk to my mom, to talk to my friend, to check my email, to be engaged with the world. These are two different tasks. So these goals compete with each other, and I need to do a lot of cognitive and executive functioning maneuvering to move from one goal to another. When we're goal oriented, when we have a focus, we are more likely to continue going toward there. If we keep moving from one route to another, it costs us time and energy. The second thing that happens is called rule activation. And rule activation is kind of like, I need to now abandon the rules of how I am in the environment of the first task and move to the new rules of the second task. So the rules of me reading my article is that I'm sitting in front of a page or in front of my computer, and I have a pen in my hand and I take notes, or maybe I have another Word document and I take notes and I read a little bit and then I write and I read and I write, or maybe I tell myself, okay, let's just read for a little while and write later. That's the rules. The rules with my phone is let me pick up something small, hold my hands in a particular way, scroll with my fingers or maybe a special pen, and the phone, usually you're not going to be that focused. Let me check all my things. Let me go from one thing to another. Let me respond immediately to someone else's needs. These are different rules. So I have to deactivate the rules of the first task and activate the rules for the second task. I have to change. I have to be a different ID now that does things differently. In this metabolic economics, that is very costly. It would be much, much, much more effective in terms of time and energy if I read my article to its end and then go to my phone. Now, how likely for me to do that? I don't know. I'm still working on it. It's not easy. It is really important to start being mindful that that's happening. So before we started the recording, Mark and I were talking about this old movie, goes to show how old I am, that I used to see as a teenager. It's called Hackers. It's really cute then. I don't know how it is now. I told Mark, I don't know if it aged well, so just aware I haven't seen it in a long time. But there were the bad guys in Hackers created kind of like a software worm that nibbled a few cents out of each transaction in a huge company. So each bank transaction didn't really feel it. You didn't feel it. It was a split second in us switching tasks, just a little bit of a cent here or there, but the fraud was of millions. It created a deficit of millions. So you're creating a deficit of millions. You don't feel it because it only costs you a few seconds or maybe less than a second every time. And if you do it repeatedly, it really does cost you. So this is why this is important. This is what we want to focus on. Mark, I'm passing it to you.
Yeah, that's great. Before I ask my engagement question, I want to acknowledge Duke. Hey, Duke, thanks for tuning in. We're back. I love seeing the stuff you're doing with Sober AF. I also sent you an email about being on my podcast. So if you want to be on the podcast, shoot me an email back. I would love to have you as a guest. But yes, what I was curious for listeners out there is, because I think we said idea is really critical, right? It seems simple. Can you read a whole article and then take notes? Right? Or then write something down, or then look at your phone. And for most people, me included, sounds like you, it's really hard. It's unbelievably hard.
Oh, yeah.
And I remember when I was getting to some of this focus work of really coming to a place of humility of wow, I really can't do this. This is really difficult for me to do something that seems very simple. So I was curious for the listeners out there, if you can comment or shoot us an email or whatever it is. How often do you think you're distracted every day, right? If you were to measure it, I used a tool called Rescue Time when I was first starting this. If you were to measure how many times you switch tasks, how much you think you would do it? And what kind of things keep you stuck? Are there specific websites, habits, or cognitive loops that keep you stuck in a distracted state? I'm really curious to know about them, and we can tailor our future content to really addressing these directly. So, Adi, I want to expand upon what you're saying about the metabolic load, because I think that's really interesting. And there's a ton of research out there about brain glycogen. for those of you that don't know, I recently just started doing a continuous glucose monitor on my arm so I could check my blood glycogen. And what I noticed is crazy things, is that when I was doing a lot of therapy, my glucose was plummeting, right? Not just because I was eating, I was eating and I was doing everything the same, but when I was doing therapy and doing, extreme attention on people, it would take a hit, right? We also know that if I'm task switching, if I'm distracted, my glycogen is going to take a hit. And this idea of blood glucose is obviously a lot more complicated when you get to physiology, but it's almost like a metric for willpower. There's a great book that's called Willpower that really goes into this, that talks about how every time you switch tasks, every time you do sustained focus, every time you have to make a decision, even, you get a little hit, kind of what Adi was talking about with that virus from hackers, right? You get a little hit of brain glucose. And over time, it creates brain fog, right? We've actually figured out that that feeling of brain fog or that feeling of decision fatigue is caused by a lack of brain glucose. And there's something you can regain from eating sugary foods, carbs, things like that. But throughout the day, it's going to continue to plummet until you sleep. It really is sleep. It's really actually eating like a nutrient, protein-dense meal and then sleeping to allow your brain to regenerate the glucose. So what's interesting about that is that burnout actually has a physiological correlate. And some of those people, some people I work with, the high performers, you might be in a situation where at the end of the day, you literally cannot make a decision. You just want to go to a restaurant, ask the person, hey, what do you think I should get? And they should order. This is a real thing. And we'll be talking more about that in the future, especially we talk about burnout. But to know that there is a physical correlate and that most people, even though we might not want to believe it, we do have a quite physical barrier for the amount of task switching and the amount of focus that we can do. Willpower is a finite resource. So on that note, when they talk about how long to focus on things, it seems as though by studying brain glucose, by studying high performers, athletes, musicians, they find that about 3 hours is the maximum amount of time that even the highest performers can spend on a certain task. And this is really important to know because the way the work schedule is set up for many employees is that you just grind for 8 hours, right? Or you just sit at your desk and do the same thing. And it was helpful for me to know that that just doesn't work from a physiological level. What really helps is for us to work for, the best people are 3 hours, call it 2, right? Work for 2 hours and then take a significant restorative break. We're talking 30 minutes of yoga, 20 minutes of mindfulness, getting a quick snack that can, replenish that glucose, walking around, getting some light movement, stretching, getting into a squat, doing push-ups, whatever it is, and then returning to the task. They found that being able to grind and sit, you end up becoming both less effective and you're able to focus for less amount of time.
Yeah. So I love that because what you're talking about here is how do little changes in the right time increase our capacity to be with what we want to be and be attentive. And it made me really curious. And this is something that I want to hear from our audience and get a little bit of a sense of, is it common for the people who listen to our little tidbits that we do here? What changes in your external environment affect your capacity to concentrate and be present, focused on whatever it is that's important to you? I know that for me, when I'm on vacation, I can suddenly devour books the way I was when I was a teenager, where I had a book all the time. In my everyday life, that time has passed. Ships have sailed. Something about being on vacation opens that capacity for me. So I'm just wondering if there's anything similar, like being in a different house, being in your childhood house, being at friends. I know that when I'm at a friend's house, it's easier for me to let go of the phone than when I'm in my familiar environment. It's kind of like curious about how it is for different people. Are there changes in the environment, changes in your schedule that pull on that and enable you to be a little bit more focused and concentrated? Love to hear that, and maybe that will give us ideas for future episodes and tricks and things to do to improve this for others. I believe that I'm going to take us to the next step now.
That's right. We're going to talk about mindfulness, which is something that we both practice. You want to kick us off on that?
Yeah. So when we talk about mindfulness, the reason I think in almost every episode of those recording, we talked in some way about mindfulness. And the reason is mindfulness increases our awareness and our ability to be attentive. In my understanding of mindfulness, It is that practice of staying with whatever it is. And for me, part of what happened in Corona is my capacity to be mindful as a therapist had a plummet for a while. And it required a lot of attention and deliberate diligence to change back to being as attentive. Because this format is really pulling on distractions. I'm a group therapist. Before Corona, I would walk into a room, close the door behind me. My phone would be in a different office. My computer would be in a different office, and I would be with the people. I would look at the group, eye contact and eye level. And that kind of supported me in something that I thought was natural to me. I'm just really curious about people. That's why I'm a therapist, etc., etc. Turns out the environment supported it in a particular way. And being mindful means that I am now being asked to sit with people's pain and their stories and how that affects me and my reaction with a much better ability to escape it to different websites, to my phone, to the window. Suddenly, that support of the environment of saying, Adi, you stay with this. This is your job. This is what you want to do, isn't there. So I have to make a decision. And mindfulness, basically, when you do a mindfulness exercise, be that just focusing on your breath or focusing on sensations in the body, that's what it requires you to do. To notice when the mind has wandered and invite the attention back to whatever it is that's the focus of our attention, the focus of the mindfulness exercise. So I think one of the things we want to ask is, are there areas, a particular area or specific areas of life, be that certain tasks, certain people, locations, certain emotions that come up, that you're more inclined to multitask or rather switch task when you're in that presence? I know that for me, like team meetings, wow, am I pulled because people talk about patients that I don't see. And I just came from a clinical hour into like this huge group of people that talk to each other. And it's very hard for me to sustain attention. Something about that is hard and it requires deliberate, mindful attention. So I think one of the recommendations that we always give is to practice mindfulness, even if it's 3 minutes a day. It doesn't have to be much more than that. Or at least if you're not the kind to just sit and practice, to give yourself opportunities to practice mindfulness of whatever it is that's going on that you are engaged with. Do you want to add anything about that, Mark?
I think that's pretty much covered. I'm sure we'll go more in depth in mindfulness. We always do talk about it. But yeah, for people to notice what takes you away, what do you want to avoid? I think that can be a really wonderful door and portal into some deeper work. If you're avoiding anger or grief or annoyance or sadness, it's really interesting to know when your mind wanders and what is there. That's some of the kind of next level after the mindfulness practice is, instead of, focusing is fantastic. And the next level is actually kind of getting insight or vipassana. It's the idea of actually studying the way that your mind works and using that as a way to continue to improve your life, to learn about yourself, learn about your conditioning, and to work through some childhood trauma if necessary. So thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, you learned about focus. We talked about what is focus, some of the science behind it, and again, plugged mindfulness. Over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be talking more about it. Right? We're going to be presenting, some real concrete tools, including how to set up a schedule, how to set up a calendar, building in routines, way to actually promote focus in your life. Because I think, Adi, what you said is really critical. It's been true in my life, is that it's very hard to hard shift the behavior, but it's a lot easier to change your environment and then noticing how your brain responds to your environment. So we're going to be focusing on how to shift your environment to create a way that you can focus. And if you're excited about this topic or you want to read ahead, there's a fantastic book that I recommend to pretty much all my coaching clients called Deep Work by Newport. It is where I'm pulling most of this from. It covers, in a lot more detail than we are going to. And it comes with a ton of practical steps for how to set up your day and set up your life so you can focus more. So thanks so much for joining. We plan on doing this every other week or so. We'll see what happens with the holidays, but we're going to keep at it. We hopefully see and hear from you soon. Take care. Bye.
Bye.